Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. The 1,000 podcast episodes milestone is already in our rear-view mirror as we continue to march forward and learn more about how technology is transforming every aspect of our lives, work, and indeed world. But one of the things that we're seeing is this increasing narrative where technology is seen as the bad guy. And we've all seen those headlines: automation, robots, artificial intelligence, technology is taking away all of our jobs, etc. But if you deconstruct these stories, ultimately it's our inherent fear of change that is responsible. So the question I've got to ask is, what is the secret to embracing change? Now, I am back in the UK now, but I wanted to share with you all one of the most powerful keynotes that I've ever seen during my travels on the road covering events. And the MagentoLive event in Amsterdam might have been all about e-commerce and changing the world through digital experiences, but the conference ended on an amazing inspirational story, an incredibly powerful keynote. Joost Rigter knows what it is like to be forced to embrace change and dare to be vulnerable, step out of his comfort zone and stay positive about it. Why? Because in his 20s, he discovered that he was losing his sight and was slowly going blind, up to the point where he's now left with just 0.08% of sight. Can you begin to imagine that? So in his keynote, 2,000 attendees all wore a blindfold and listened to his story. Now, I don't want to reveal too much about it and spoil today's interview, but after over 1,000 interviews, I promise you, this story will stay in your hearts and minds for many years after you've listened to this podcast. So I invite you to come and join me in Amsterdam one more time so we can speak with Joost about his inspirational story and how it might be able to help you adapt to change too. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you're here in Amsterdam?
Of course, yeah. Amsterdam is my hometown, so I feel really in place. They asked me to do the closing keynote for today at MagentoLive.
Cool.
And my name is Joost Rigter, and I'm a speaker. And yeah, I can bring my story to the audience of 2,000 people, so I'm really pleased to be here.
And also what I'd love to do is not only for you to share that story for 2,000 people here, but also to listeners in 165 countries on this podcast. So as this is a tech show, though, I feel I must explore the very human challenge of how people approach technological change, especially with so much negative press around robots taking jobs and automation. Adapting to change has never been more critical for people. But why is it you think people struggle with change so much?
It's always very difficult to deal with changes in your life. I have experience with that as well. But I think when there is a big change, people are getting out of their comfort zone. And when you are out of your comfort zone, mostly of the time you're getting a little bit vulnerable.
Yeah.
And people think it's really difficult to be vulnerable these times. But I think when you're there to be vulnerable, you're truly great.
Yeah.
It makes you much stronger. It shows really who you are. And I think it also connect with people more. You connect with people a little bit more when you are yourself. But you want to do good in life. You want to stay strong and show strong.
Yeah.
And but I think it's the vulnerability that is difficult, and also that you are out of your comfort zone when there is a big change in your life.
Absolutely. And you have such an inspirational story that I'm certain is going to remain with people for a long time, long after they've listened to this podcast today. So can I ask that you share your story and how you had to deal with a life-changing moment?
Yeah, my biggest change in my life was when I became 26. Friends told me, Joost, are you okay? I think there is something, you have to check your eyes. We think there might be something wrong with your eyes. And when they told me that, I began a little bit to worry, and I thought I have to go to the hospital. I thought I came there for a diagnose, like, okay, there's something wrong with your eyes, but you can deal with that and we can help you with that. But they told me the terrible news that I had a very aggressive eye disease that likely lead to blindness. Yeah, that was at first, and that sounds a bit weird, a sort of a relief, because finally I knew what was wrong with me. After a long time, I was coping with that disease. I don't know if you say that I say that in the right words.
Yes.
Cope with it. So, but then I really got the news that I maybe become blind. And at that stage, I saw about 50%. And when I became 33, I saw about 0.8% to 0.8%. So yeah, it is really progressive.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was a really big change in my life to hear that news and really deal with that change. And how do you do that? First of all, I was really confused. What am I going to do when I'm blind?
Yeah.
So that was a big change in my life.
And looking back, I've got to ask, I mean, how did you initially deal with that news? Well, I would imagine that there were elements of anger, first of all, and then from that, what about the moment where you began to accept that change and use it to make a difference in the world? Can you just tell me through that whole journey of emotions?
Of course, yeah. It was, at first, I was completely denying the situation. I was a waiter in a restaurant and still thought about, okay, I will pretend there's nothing wrong, go about my regular life, working in that restaurant again, until the news came from the owner of the restaurant. So, sorry Joost, but we cannot go through with you. So at first it was denial. Afterwards, frustration. What is wrong with me? I can do better. I'm good in this job. I'm worth it, and it's my dream to start a restaurant. So I was really frustrated, and afterwards there came like a slowly acceptance. Like, okay, how am I going to deal with it? Is there a possibility that there is something more than my eyes? Can I focus on other things in life? But it was a journey of, I think, 7 years of denial and frustration. And afterwards, when the acceptance came, I was getting more easygoing and really focus on what I can do instead of what I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it really is an inspirational journey, because now, of course, you're a hugely popular speaker in the world of business, both nationally and internationally. And I think you've spoke with everyone at events for everyone, such as Shell to Walt Disney to Deloitte to KLM. I mean, can you tell me more about how you're helping these businesses with your keynotes and indeed your workshops too?
Yeah, the thing is that there are a lot of people and businesses in change.
Yep.
It's the most constant thing on the agenda.
Yep.
Change. And what I would like to give my audience is a little reflection. Not only telling my story about how I dealt with changes and how to be successful again with the 0.8% I have left with my eyes, but also bring them into the dark, really focusing on the story, on the journey, but also reflect on their own journey. And when they are in the dark, they completely focused on themselves and really feel through my story that they go to their own story, and think about how they can deal with the changes, small and big, in their life. So, I hope to bring them a sort of a reflection and also a motivation that they think about, it's possible. There are no limits. We can do it. The only thing is we have to do it in another way. And also I would love to give a story that really say that when there is a change, it could be fun, and there are possibilities in the change we have.
So what kind of feedback have you received from these companies after you've enabled the audience to experience what the world looks like, but without seeing? And what do they learn from that?
Sometimes really they have to really feel it's too short after the session to process everything.
Yeah.
And they are really like, whoa, what did I do in the dark? Most of the time people are sitting in the dark for about 1 hour. But a lot of people come to me and really say like, oh wow, this is a really different perspective. I learned how to focus with other senses. They are really really motivated to do it maybe in a different way, and feel that when they hear about a big change in life, they also think about their lives as some small changes, so that they really can deal with that more easily. So yeah, but there are so many mails I got. Yesterday I got a mail from someone that said like, you saved my life.
Wow.
And I really thought about, okay, you can make a real impact just in 1 hour sometimes. So yeah, it's I think not only the story that can bring a big impact, but also the darkness that you go into your own life, focusing on that, and not be judgmental about what you see.
Yeah.
But just go inside. And yeah, it's 1 hour meditation or something, I don't know, but some people say that sometimes, like, closing your eyes is going into yourself. Yeah.
And one of the messages that I say at the end of every episode here is technology works best when it brings people together. So as this is a tech show, I wanted to ask you, how is technology helping visually impaired people, making their lives easier and ultimately connecting them as well?
Yeah, it's I'm so happy that I live now in 2019 because they improved with the technology for visually impaired people. Normally we had only Braille and that was it. But now we have the iPhone. For me, that's the most important equipment to have. It's really good with voice. So I can put a mode on the iPhone. So it's in everyone's iPhone. And there is a voice-over coming. So when I got a mail, Apple will share that mail through speech, through voice. So it's really easy to work with an iPhone or with Apple computers.
Yeah.
Work with Microsoft, then you have to buy something to make it easier, and then you buy the voice computer voicing.
Now, I also believe you've done a TED Talk recently too. Can you tell me about that and the topic that you covered?
It is a TED Talk is 50 minutes, so yeah. It's a short story. It's also about how to deal with changes. It's one of my topics, but also it's not only about change. It's also about making connection with each other. I bring the people into the dark, and they are all together in the dark, so they really feel that they have something in common with each other. It brings also, you have to trust, because when you are in the dark, are you not the only one that is in the dark? You know, people ask themselves sometimes the question like, am I not the only one?
Yeah.
But also, it's about motivation. With all that, you have a lot of changes in your life, but please, it's how you deal with them.
Absolutely. And I think that most people listening would agree that they take their health and all their senses for granted. So before I let you go, could I ask what you've learnt from losing your sight, and what advice you would leave people listening today who maybe put limitations on themselves and convince themselves that they can't do things. Is there any kind of advice that you would pass down to those people?
Yeah, at first I was really afraid to be visually impaired and to getting blind. You know, I'm sort of a socially blind person now because I see less than 1%. At first it was okay. For me, it was I cannot do this anymore. I cannot do that anymore. So I was really looking in a negative way to my disease. And later on, I started to get more perspective because I thought about the other senses I had left, and with the other senses, I could listen better to people, what they really said to me. I was really focused when I could see on people on the outside of the world, but now I could really go and had much deeper conversation with people. So that helped me to understand people better, understand myself better, and also what I really would like to give to people, how do you say that? Share with people.
Yes.
Is the eyes are sometimes not the only thing you need to really make a good decision in life. It starts with listening to people, and please use other senses and try to look in a different perspective sometimes to things in life or to cases you have or to business. Yeah.
So there's going to be 2,000 people watching you close the MagentoLive event today. There's people listening to this podcast in 165 countries. And I think there's going to be a lot of business leaders thinking, I need him to come and speak at my conference too. So can you remind the listeners of where they can find you online and also contact your team if they do have any questions after listening to our conversation?
Of course. I have a website, and it's my name. My name is Joost Rigter. Not the most easy name for people most of the time, but it's www.joostrichter.nl or .com, and then you can find me, book me, but also you can write a mail, and maybe you can call me because I don't know if my direct number is still on it, but I like to have a real personal talk with people. But I have, of course, now a team with me, and they answered all the questions. So yeah, of course, they can find me. Yeah.
Well, I'll add links to the blog post that will accompany this podcast over on my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. But I wish you the best of luck for the future. Like I say, at the end of every episode, I always say technology works best when it brings people together, and you've proven just that. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Can you begin to imagine what it must feel like to be going slowly blind and being left with 0.8% sight? I cannot thank Joost enough for taking us on an experience. And that keynote was something else, where everybody sat there quietly, blindfolded, listening to his story, his journey through coping and accepting what had happened to him and the impact on his life and the kind of lessons that we can all learn from that. And during that keynote, Joost enabled the audience to experience what the world looks like without seeing. And yes, it was only for a short amount of time, but he enabled everybody to learn from that. So, how do you deal with change? How do you find light in the dark? How do courage, humour, acceptance and self-confidence ensure that obstacles are actually much, much smaller than they seem? I would love to hear your thoughts after listening to this incredibly powerful and inspirational story. So please, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes. And remember, I'll post links to Joost's website, his story, and how he's helping huge names from Shell to Walt Disney to Deloitte from KLM. And I'll put those links on my website at techblogwriter.co.uk. Just select podcast and you should be able to find everything you need there. So, wow, amazing stuff. And wherever you're listening to this podcast today, I urge you to remove those self-imposed limitations and negative phrases such as, I can't do that. Trust me, if I learn anything from Joost, it's you can do anything that you want. So let's try to do just that and bring a little positive change into the world. So thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.